Maya Shun stood barely 5 feet 3 inches tall, her frame so delicate that a strong breeze seemed capable of knocking her over. At 24 years old, she possessed the kind of ethereal beauty that made people instinctively want to protect. Her porcelain skin that seemed to glow under fluorescent lights, long black hair that cascaded like silk down her back, and eyes so large and expressive they reminded everyone of a doe caught in headlights. Her voice, when she spoke, was barely above a whisper, and her movements carried the grace of someone who had spent years apologizing for taking up space. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Iron Phoenix Gym was not a place for someone like Maya. Located in the industrial district of downtown Seattle, it was a temple of testosterone and sweat, where concrete walls echoed with the thunderous sounds of barbells hitting the floor and the rhythmic pounding of leather against heavy bags. This was where serious fighters came to train, where amateur boxers transformed into professionals, and where the weak were quickly separated from the strong. The gym smelled of rubber mats, metal polish, and the kind of determination that could only be forged through pain and persistence. Maya had walked through those glass doors on a rainy Tuesday morning, her designer yoga mat tucked under one arm and a small pink water bottle in her hand. The immediate silence that fell over the gym was deafening. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, weights paused mid-rep, and even the sound of skipping rope seemed to falter. She looked like she had wandered into the wrong building, perhaps searching for a Pilates studio or a meditation class. Coach Viktor Petrov, a mountain of a man whose arms were covered in tattoos, telling stories of his decades in professional boxing, looked up from wrapping a fighter's hands and squinted at the newcomer. His thick Russian accent cut through the silence like a blade. "Little girl, I think you are lost. The yoga studio is 3 blocks down, next to the coffee shop with the fancy pastries." Maya's cheeks flushed pink, but she stepped forward with quiet determination. "Actually, I'm here to train. I called yesterday about the membership." Her voice was so soft that Victor had to lean forward to hear her properly. A ripple of barely contained laughter spread through the gym. Tommy "the Hammer" Rodriguez, a heavyweight boxer preparing for his next professional fight, couldn't help but chuckle as he adjusted his hand wraps. "Training for what, sweetheart? A butterfly catching competition?" The comment sent a wave of snickers through the assembled fighters and trainers. Maya's face grew redder, but she maintained her composure, simply nodding toward the registration desk. "I have my membership confirmation on my phone if you need to see it." Victor shook his head, his expression mixing amusement with genuine concern. "Listen, little dove, this place is not for you. We train fighters here, not dancers. You could get hurt just walking past the heavy bags when someone is working them. Why don't you try the nice clean gym in the shopping mall? They have machines with buttons and air conditioning." What Victor and the others didn't know was that Maya had spent the better part of 3 months researching gyms in the city. She had visited 12 different facilities, each one turning her away with varying degrees of politeness. Some cited insurance concerns, others simply laughed at her inquiry. The Iron Phoenix was her 13th and final option, and she had already paid the membership fee online to avoid another immediate rejection. "I understand your concerns," Maya said, her voice gaining a fraction of strength. "But I've already paid for a month, and I promise I won't get in anyone's way. I just need a place to train." Victor studied her for a long moment, his weathered face creased with skepticism. Finally, he shrugged his massive shoulders. "Your funeral, little one. But when you realize this was a mistake, don't come crying to me for a refund." Maya's first week at the Iron Phoenix was a masterclass in humiliation. She arrived every morning at precisely 6 o'clock, when the gym was quietest, hoping to avoid the worst of the stares and comments. She started with basic exercises, jumping jacks, push-ups, Sit-ups, activities that seemed laughably elementary in an environment where others were lifting weights that exceeded her body weight. Her push-ups were particularly pitiful. She could barely manage 5 proper ones before her arms gave out, forcing her to drop to her knees to continue. The sight of her struggling with what most gym members considered a warm-up exercise became a source of daily entertainment. "Check it out," laughed Sarah Steeljaw Martinez, a female MMA fighter whose reputation for devastating knockouts was legendary in the local circuit. "Princess is trying to do real push-ups again. Maybe someone should get her some training." Wheels. The comment drew laughter from the small group of early morning regulars, but Maya simply adjusted her position and continued with her modified push-ups. She never responded to the taunts, never defended herself, and never showed anger. This lack of reaction only seemed to encourage more comments. What the gym members failed to notice was Maya's consistency. While others might skip days due to soreness, hangovers, or simple lack of motivation, Maya appeared every single morning like clockwork. Rain or shine, weekend or weekday, she was there at 6 sharp, going through her routine with methodical precision. She had developed a habit of carrying a small leather journal, no bigger than her palm, in which she meticulously recorded every exercise, every repetition, every small improvement. During rest periods, while others scrolled through their phones or engaged in loud conversations about their weekend conquests, Maya would quietly write in her journal, her pen moving across the pages with the focus of a scholar documenting important research. "What's she writing in there?" wondered Jake the Wall Thompson, a bouncer-turned-boxer whose intimidating presence was matched only by his curiosity about the gym's most unusual member. Her feelings? "Dear Diary, today the mean people at the gym were mean to me again." The observation sparked a new round of mockery. Several gym members began making exaggerated writing motions whenever Maya pulled out her journal, pretending to write an imaginary diaries about their emotional journeys and spiritual awakenings. Maya's response was always the same, a slight tightening around her eyes, a deeper flush to her cheeks, and then a return to her writing with even greater focus. She seemed to absorb the ridicule like a sponge, never letting it overflow into visible anger or tears. What none of them realized was that Maya's journal contained detailed observations about every person in the gym. She noted their training patterns, their strengths and weaknesses, their fighting styles, and their personal triggers. She documented which fighters favored their left side, who dropped their guard when they were tired, and which trainers pushed their students hardest. Her pages were filled with tactical analyses that would have impressed military strategists. The gym's hierarchy quickly established itself around Maya's presence. She became the unofficial bottom rung of the social ladder, the person everyone could feel superior to regardless of their own limitations. Even the newest members, those who struggled with basic combinations or couldn't last 2 rounds on the bags, found confidence in their superiority over the fragile princess. Victor, despite his initial warnings, found himself oddly protective of Maya. He never participated in the mockery, though he never stopped it either. Occasionally, he would offer gruff advice when he saw her struggling with a technique, though always with the tone of someone humoring a child's fantasy rather than training a serious student. "Your form is terrible," he would say, watching Maya attempt to shadowbox. "You punch like you're afraid of hurting the air. In real fight, air would win." Maya would nod seriously, absorbing every word of criticism and immediately attempting to implement the corrections. Her dedication was undeniable, even if her natural talent appeared non-existent. The gym's culture was built on respect earned through demonstrated skill and toughness. New members were expected to prove themselves, usually through sparring sessions, or by showing their ability to handle the physical demands of serious training. Maya, however, seemed content to exist in her own bubble, never challenging anyone, never demanding respect, and never pushing back against the treatment she received. This passive acceptance only reinforced everyone's perception of her as weak and unsuitable for the environment. In a place where aggression and dominance were currency, Maya's gentle demeanor was interpreted as cowardice. 3 weeks into her membership, Maya's routine had become as predictable as the sunrise. She would arrive at 6, spend 15 minutes on basic calisthenics, 30 minutes practicing basic punches and kicks against the air, and then 15 minutes writing in her journal before leaving for what everyone assumed was her day job as a librarian or kindergarten teacher. The speculation about Maya's life outside the gym became another source of entertainment. Tommy was convinced she was a rich girl whose parents were forcing her to exercise. Sarah believed she was preparing for a role in a movie where she played a fighter, though she couldn't imagine Maya being convincing even in that context. Jake theorized she was working through some kind of personal trauma and had chosen the gym as a form of exposure therapy. None of their theories came close to the truth. Maya's apartment, a small studio in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, told a different story entirely. The walls were covered with photographs, newspaper clippings, and printed articles, all connected by red string in a pattern that would have looked at home in a detective's investigation room. The central figure in this web of information was a woman who shared Maya's delicate features but possessed an intensity that burned through every photograph. Dr. Alina Chen had been Maya's older sister, a brilliant neuroscientist whose research into the connection between mental focus and physical performance had earned her international recognition. Alina's work had been revolutionary, demonstrating how the brain could be trained to unlock physical potential that seemed impossible given a person's natural limitations. The newspaper clipping that held the place of honor in Maya's makeshift shrine was dated 18 months earlier. The headline read, "Promising Scientist Dies in Car Accident Following Anonymous Threats." The article detailed how Dr. Chun had been receiving threatening messages from unknown sources warning her to stop her research. The police investigation had concluded that the threats were unrelated to her death, ruling it an accident caused by poor weather conditions. Maya knew better. Elena's research had been on the verge of a breakthrough when she died. Her final paper, published posthumously, had hinted at techniques that could allow individuals to access strength and speed far beyond what their physical appearance suggested. The implications were staggering, not just for sports and fitness, but for military applications, law enforcement, and personal protection. The threatening messages Elena had received weren't from random cranks. They came from people who understood the true value of her work and wanted to ensure it never saw the light of day. Maya had spent months investigating, following paper trails and interviewing her sister's colleagues, until she had identified the source of the threats. Dr. Marcus Voss, a former military contractor who now ran a private security firm, had been working on similar research for years without success. Elena's breakthrough had threatened to make his work obsolete and cost him millions in government contracts. Maya had found evidence linking Voss to the threats, but nothing that would hold up in court, which was why Maya had spent 6 months learning everything she could about Elena's research, practicing the techniques described in her sister's private notes, and preparing for a confrontation that would require more than legal documents to resolve. The gentle woman who came to the Iron Phoenix every morning was not seeking fitness or self-improvement. She was preparing for war. Maya's 4th week at the Iron Phoenix began with an unexpected disruption to her routine. She arrived at her usual time to find the gym already buzzing with activity. A camera crew was setting up equipment in the corner, and several people in expensive suits were surveying the space with the critical eye of television producers. "What's going on?" Maya asked quietly, approaching the reception desk where Lisa, the gym's manager, was frantically organizing paperwork. "Some reality show is filming a segment here," Lisa explained without looking up. "They're doing a piece on unusual training methods or something." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Victor's not happy about it, but they're paying enough to keep the lights on for 3 months. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. Reality shows meant exposure, and exposure was the last thing she needed. Her investigation into Dr. Vos had revealed that he had contacts throughout the entertainment industry, using television appearances and social media to identify potential threats to his operations. She considered leaving, but doing so would break the routine she had worked so hard to establish. Instead, she found a corner of the gym as far from the cameras as possible and began her usual warm-up exercises. The producer, a sharp-faced woman named Jennifer Walsh, was explaining the concept to Victor while her assistants positioned cameras around the gym. "We're looking for compelling stories about transformation and hidden potential. The audience loves an underdog narrative." Victor nodded, though his expression suggested he was more interested in the check than the artistic vision. "You want to film the regular people training? Most of them are pretty boring." "That's perfect," Jennifer assured him. Boring is authentic. We'll just let the cameras roll and see what happens naturally." What happened naturally was that Maya became an immediate focal point for the crew. Her delicate appearance and serious demeanor in such a rough environment was exactly the kind of visual contradiction that made for compelling television. Within minutes of beginning filming, 3 different cameras were capturing her every movement. The attention from the cameras seemed to energize the gym's regular members. They began training with more intensity, speaking louder, and generally performing for the audience they knew would eventually watch the footage. Maya, unaware that she was being filmed, continued her routine with the same quiet focus she brought. Every day, Tommy, spotting an opportunity to showcase his personality for the cameras, decided to provide commentary on Maya's workout. "Check this out," he said, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. "We've got our own little mascot here. She's been coming for weeks, and I swear she's gotten weaker instead of stronger." The comment drew laughter from the group of fighters who had gathered around the heavy bags. Sarah joined in, her voice carrying clearly across the gym. "I've seen toddlers throw better punches. Maya here makes a butterfly look aggressive." Maya's face flushed, but she continued her shadowboxing routine, seemingly oblivious to the commentary. The cameras captured every moment her tentative punches, her careful movements, and the amused expressions of the other gym members. Jennifer Walsh watched the footage on her monitor with growing excitement. This was exactly the kind of content that would resonate with viewers. The contrast between Maya's gentle appearance and the harsh environment of the gym was television gold. "Get closer," she whispered to her cameraman. "I want to see her face when they're talking about her." The cameraman zoomed in on Maya's expression as the comments continued. Her large eyes remained focused on her imaginary opponent, but the subtle tightening around her mouth suggested she was hearing every word. Victor, uncomfortable with the direction the filming was taking, approached Jennifer. "Maybe we should film something else. The girl is not bothering anyone." "No, this is perfect," Jennifer insisted. "The audience will connect with her. She's like every person who's ever felt out of place in a gym. It's relatable." What Jennifer didn't realize was that Maya's apparent obliviousness was carefully calculated. She had noticed the cameras the moment she entered the gym, identified the key personnel, and was now using their presence to her advantage. The footage being captured would serve as perfect documentation of her supposed weakness and inability to defend herself. As the morning wore on, the presence of the cameras began to affect the gym's atmosphere in unexpected ways. The regular members, energized by the attention, began pushing themselves harder than usual. Weights were lifted with more dramatic grunts. Punches were thrown with more visible force, and conversations became more animated and colorful. Maya, meanwhile, maintained her routine with mechanical precision. She completed her calisthenics, moved through her shadowboxing forms, and spent her usual 15 minutes writing in her journal. The cameras captured it all, building a comprehensive record of her presence in the gym. During a break in filming, one of the camera operators approached Maya. "Excuse me, miss. The producer would like to ask you a few questions for the show." Maya looked up from her journal, her expression genuinely surprised. "Me? I don't think I'd be very interesting to your viewers. Trust me," the operator said with a smile. "You'd be surprised what people find interesting." Maya followed the operator to where Jennifer was waiting with a handheld microphone. The producer's smile was warm but professional, the kind perfected through years of coaxing stories out of reluctant subjects. "I'm Jennifer Walsh," she said, extending her hand. "I'm producing a segment about people who challenge stereotypes. Through fitness, your story could be really inspiring." Maya shook the offered hand, her grip so light it barely registered. "I'm not sure I have much of a story to tell. I just come here to exercise." "But that's exactly what makes it interesting," Jennifer pressed. "You're clearly not a typical gym member. What brought you here instead of a more traditional fitness center?" Maya seemed to consider the question carefully, her eyes flickering toward the cameras before returning to Jennifer's face. "I suppose I wanted to challenge myself. I've always been considered fragile, and I thought maybe training in a place like this would help me become stronger." "And how has that been working out for you?" A slight smile played at the corners of Maya's mouth. "I think I'm making progress, even if it's not obvious to everyone else." The interview continued for several more minutes, with Maya providing carefully measured responses that painted her as a determined but overmatched underdog. She spoke about feeling intimidated by the other gym members, about struggling with even basic exercises, and about her hope that persistence would eventually pay off. Jennifer was delighted with the footage. Maya's soft-spoken sincerity was exactly what the show needed to balance the more aggressive personalities of the other gym members. The contrast would make for compelling television. As the filming wrapped up, Maya returned to her corner of the gym to finish her workout. She had one more exercise to complete, something she had been building toward for weeks but had never attempted in front of an audience. The heavy bag in the far corner of the gym was a scarred veteran of countless training sessions. Its surface was worn smooth in places, cracked and patched in others, and it hung from a chain that had been reinforced multiple times over the years. It was the gym's most popular piece of equipment, and there was an unspoken hierarchy about who was allowed to use it. Maya had been watching that bag for weeks, studying how different fighters approached it, noting the techniques that generated the most power, and observing the subtle details that separated effective strikes from flashy but ineffective ones. Her journal contained detailed analyses of every person who had worked the bag, including measurements of their reach, timing, and the specific combinations they favored. Now, with the camera still rolling and the gym members continuing their routines, Maya approached the heavy bag with the same quiet determination she brought to everything else. Tommy noticed her first. "Oh, this should be good," he called out, loud enough to draw attention from across the gym. "Princess is going to try the heavy bag." The comment caused a ripple of interest throughout the gym. Several people stopped their workouts to watch, anticipating what would surely be an embarrassing display of Maya's limitations. Maya stood in front of the bag, her small frame dwarfed by its bulk. She raised her hands in a basic fighting stance, her movements careful and precise. The gym fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic. Outside, she threw her first punch, a tentative jab that barely made the bag move. The sound was soft, almost apologetic, and it drew a few chuckles from the watching crowd. "Careful there, Maya," called out Jake. "You don't want to hurt your hand on that dangerous bag." Maya stepped back, shaking her head as if disappointed in herself. She looked at her hands, flexing her fingers as if checking for injury from the minimal contact. The gesture drew more laughter from the crowd. Jennifer Walsh was capturing every moment on her camera, her excitement growing as the scene developed. This was exactly the kind of content that would resonate with viewers. The underdog facing impossible odds, the gentle soul trying to find strength in a harsh world. Maya approached the bag again, this time with what appeared to be greater determination. She set her stance, raised her hands, and prepared to throw another punch. The gym members continued their commentary, their voices mixing amusement with genuine concern that she might actually hurt herself. What happened next would be replayed thousands of times on social media, analyzed by sports commentators, and studied by martial arts experts around the world. Maya's stance shifted almost imperceptibly. Her weight redistributed in a way that was barely visible to the casual observer, but fundamentally changed the mechanics of her entire body. Her breathing pattern altered, becoming deeper and more controlled. Her eyes, which had seemed unfocused and uncertain, suddenly locked onto a specific point on the heavy bag with laser-like intensity. The transformation was subtle but complete. The fragile girl who had been apologetically tapping the bag moments before was gone, replaced by someone who seemed to occupy space differently, who moved with purpose and precision that suggested years of training. Victor, who had been watching with mild interest, suddenly straightened. His experienced eye caught the change in Maya's posture, the way her muscles seemed to coil with potential energy. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words never came. Maya's fist moved with a speed that seemed to defy physics. One moment she was standing in front of the bag, the next her punch was connecting with a sound like a thunderclap. The heavy bag, which weighed over 100 pounds and had absorbed the punishment of professional fighters for years, exploded. The impact split the leather covering from top to bottom, sending a shower of sand and fabric across the gym floor. The bag's chain, reinforced multiple times over its lifetime, snapped like a guitar string. The entire apparatus crashed to the ground with a sound that echoed through the stunned silence of the gym. Maya stood in the aftermath, her fist still extended, her expression calm and controlled. She looked at her hand, flexing her fingers, as if checking for damage, then turned to face the assembled crowd of gym members who were staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to disbelief. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Tommy finally found his voice. "What the hell just happened?" Maya lowered her hand and picked up her journal from where she had placed it on a nearby bench. She wrote something quickly, then closed the notebook and tucked it into her gym bag. "I think," she said, her voice still soft but carrying a new quality that hadn't been there before, "I'm making progress." The cameras had captured every moment of the impossible display, from Maya's tentative first punch to the explosive destruction of the heavy bag. Jennifer Walsh stared at her monitor in disbelief, rewinding the footage to confirm that she had actually recorded what her eyes had seen. Victor approached Maya slowly, his expression mixing awe with suspicion. "How did you do that?" Maya shouldered her gym bag and walked toward the exit. "Practice," she said simply. "Lots and lots of practice." As she reached the door, she paused and turned back to face the gym. "Oh, and my name isn't Princess," she added, meeting the eyes of each person who had spent weeks mocking her. "It's Maya Chun. You might want to remember that." She left the gym with the same quiet dignity she had brought to it every morning, but everything had changed. The fragile girl who had been the object of everyone's amusement was gone, replaced by someone who had just demonstrated that appearances could be not just deceiving, but dangerously so. Behind her, the gym remained in stunned silence, broken only by the sound of sand trickling from the destroyed heavy bag onto the floor. The footage of what had happened would soon make Maya famous, but fame was never her goal. She had come to the Iron Phoenix to prepare for a war, and she had just announced that she was ready to fight. The video went viral within hours of Jennifer Walsh uploading it to the network's social media channels. The footage of Maya destroying the heavy bag had been viewed over 2 million times by evening, shared across platforms with captions ranging from "fake" to "what did I just watch" to detailed frame by frame. Analyzers attempting to explain the physics of what had occurred. Dr. Marcus Vos was having dinner at an exclusive restaurant in downtown Los Angeles when his phone began buzzing with notifications. His assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Torres, leaned across the table with her tablet already displaying the viral video. "Sir, you need to see this," she said, her voice carrying an urgency that made Vos set down his wine glass. He watched the footage 3 times before speaking, his expression growing darker with each viewing. The delicate Asian woman on the screen bore an unmistakable resemblance to someone from his past, someone whose research had cost him millions in lost contracts and whose death he had orchestrated to protect his interests. "Find out everything about her," he said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of controlled menace that had made him feared in both military and corporate circles. "Real name, address, family connections, everything. And do it tonight." Rebecca nodded, already making notes on her tablet. "Should I assemble a team?" "Not yet," Vos replied, his eyes fixed on the frozen image of Maya's face on the screen. "But have them ready. If she's who I think she is, this situation is about to become very complicated." Meanwhile, Maya sat in her small apartment, completely unaware of the digital storm swirling around her. She had disconnected her internet connection hours earlier, a security measure she employed whenever she needed to focus on sensitive research. Her walls, covered with photographs and documents related to her sister's death, seemed to pulse with new significance in the lamplight. She pulled out her journal and began writing, her pen moving across the pages with the same methodical precision she brought to everything else. Tonight's entry was different from her usual training notes. Tonight, she documented the first phase of a plan that had been 18 months in the making. The destruction of the heavy bag had been more than a demonstration of hidden strength. It had been a message broadcast to the world through the magic of viral media. Maya knew that Dr. Marcus Vos monitored social media platforms for signs of anyone connected to Elena's research. The video would reach him within hours, and when it did, he would recognize the technique she had used. Elena's final research had focused on something she called neuromuscular optimization, a method of training the brain to unlock the body's hidden potential through precise mental conditioning. The technique required months of preparation, combining meditation, visualization, and carefully calibrated physical exercises. The result was the ability to generate force that seemed impossible given the practitioner's apparent physical limitations. Maya had spent 6 months mastering her sister's techniques, practicing in the privacy of her apartment, while maintaining the facade of weakness during her public appearances at the gym. Every stumble, every failed push-up, every moment of apparent struggle had been carefully calculated to reinforce the perception that she was harmless. Now that perception had been shattered and the real game could begin. The next morning brought a fundamental shift in the atmosphere at the Iron Phoenix. Maya arrived at her usual time to find the gym buzzing with an energy that had nothing to do with exercise. Groups of members clustered around phones and tablets, watching and rewatching the video that had made their quiet mascot an internet sensation overnight. Victor stood near the destroyed heavy bag, which had been cleared away but left a noticeable gap in the gym's layout. His expression was unreadable as Maya approached, but his eyes followed her every movement with the intensity of a man reassessing everything he thought he knew. "Morning, Victor," Maya said, her voice carrying the same soft quality it always had. "Morning," he replied, though the word came out more like a question than a greeting. "We need to talk." Maya nodded and followed him to his small office, a cramped space filled with boxing memorabilia and stacks of paperwork. Victor closed the door and gestured for her to sit, but remained standing himself, his massive frame towering over the desk. 27 years I have been training fighters," he began, his Russian accent thicker than usual. "I have seen men who could break bricks with their bare hands, women who could knock out opponents twice their size. But what you did yesterday," he shook his head, That was not normal strength. That was something else. Maya met his gaze. Steadily. What do you want to know? Everything, Victor said bluntly. Where you learned to do that, who trained you, what you are really doing in my gym. Maya considered her response carefully. Victor had been kind to her in his gruff way, never participating in the mockery that others had subjected her to. She owed him some version of the truth, even if she couldn't reveal everything. My sister was a researcher, she said finally. She studied the connection between mental training and physical performance. Before she died, she taught me some of her techniques. Your sister is dead? Car accident, Maya replied, the words carrying a weight that suggested there was more to the story. 18 months ago. Victor studied her face, his experienced eye catching the subtle signs of grief and anger that most people would miss. And now you are here, training these techniques, making videos that show the whole world what you can do. Why? Maya's smile was small but genuine. Because I want certain people to know that Elena's work didn't die with her. Before Victor could respond, a sharp knock interrupted their conversation. Rebecca Torres stood in the doorway, her expensive suit and confident posture marking her as someone who didn't belong in the rough environment of the gym. Excuse me, she said, her voice carrying the crisp authority of corporate power. I'm looking for Maya Chun. I represent some people who would very much like to meet with her. Victor's expression darkened. And who are these people? Rebecca smiled, but the expression didn't reach her eyes. Investors. People who are interested in unique training methods and exceptional talent. Maya felt her pulse quicken, though she kept her expression neutral. She had expected this contact, but not quite so soon. Dr. Voss was moving faster than she had anticipated. I'm Maya, she said, standing slowly. What kind of investors? The kind who can make someone with your abilities very wealthy, Rebecca replied. My employer has developed quite an interest in your techniques. He'd like to discuss a business proposition. Victor stepped forward, his bulk filling the small office. She is not interested in business propositions. With respect, Rebecca said, her tone suggesting she had very little respect for Victor's opinion. I think Maya can speak for herself. Maya looked between them, weighing her options. Meeting with Voss's representatives was dangerous, but it was also exactly what she had been working toward. She needed to get close enough to her sister's killer to gather the evidence that would destroy him. I'd be happy to hear what your employer has to say, Maya said, ignoring Victor's sharp intake of breath. When and where? Rebecca's smile became more genuine. Tonight. There's a private club downtown called the Meridian. My employer has reserved the penthouse for 8 o'clock. She handed Maya an elegant business card with nothing but an address and a time embossed in gold lettering. Dress appropriately. This is a high-class establishment. After Rebecca left, Victor grabbed Maya's arm with surprising gentleness. This is a mistake. People like that, they do not make business propositions. They make offers you cannot refuse. Maya patted his hand reassuringly. I know what I'm doing, Victor. Trust me. But as she left the gym that morning, Maya wasn't entirely sure she was telling the truth. Dr. Marcus Voss was a dangerous man with resources that dwarfed her own. She was walking into his territory, accepting his invitation, playing his game. One mistake could cost her everything, including her life. The Meridian Club occupied the top 15 floors of a gleaming tower in the heart of Seattle's financial district. The building's lobby was all marble and brass, designed to intimidate visitors with its ostentatious display of wealth and power. Maya arrived at precisely 8 o'clock, wearing a simple black dress that she had purchased that afternoon from a discount store. The elevator ride to the penthouse was silent except for the soft hum of expensive machinery. Maya used the time to center herself, employing the meditation techniques Elena had taught her to calm her mind and prepare her body for whatever was to come. The penthouse doors opened to reveal a space that looked more like a private gentleman's club than a business office. Leather furniture arranged around a massive fireplace, walls lined with first edition books, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of the city below. The overall effect was designed to make visitors feel small and insignificant. Dr. Marcus Voss stood with his back to the elevator, a silhouette against the city lights. He was taller than Maya had expected, with silver hair and a kind of bearing that suggested military training. When he turned to face her, his eyes were the cold blue of Arctic ice. "Miss Chun," he said, his voice carrying a slight German accent. "Thank you for accepting my invitation." Maya stepped into the room, her movements careful and controlled. "Thank you for extending it, Dr. Voss." His eyebrows rose slightly at her use of his name. "You know who I am. I know who you are, what you do, and why you wanted to meet with me," Maya replied, accepting the glass of wine he offered. "The question is whether you know who I am." Voss studied her face for a long moment. "You're Dr. Elena Chun's younger sister. You've spent the last 18 months investigating her death and learning her research techniques. You believe I was responsible for the car accident that killed her." Maya sipped her wine, using the moment to process the implications of his words. He wasn't denying her accusations or pretending ignorance. He was laying his cards on the table, confident in his position of power. "And you're here," Voss continued, "because you want revenge." "I'm here because I want justice," Maya corrected. "There's a difference." Voss laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Justice is a luxury for people who can afford it. Your sister was threatening to publish research that would have cost me hundreds of millions of dollars. She chose to ignore my warnings, and she suffered the consequences." The casual admission of murder sent a chill through Maya's body, but she kept her expression neutral. "And now you think I'm a threat as well?" "On the contrary," Voss said, settling into a leather armchair across from her. "I think you're an opportunity. Your sister's research was brilliant, but she lacked vision. She wanted to use her discoveries to help athletes and soldiers improve their performance. Small thinking, limited applications." He leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. "But I see bigger possibilities. Imagine an army of operatives who appear harmless, but can generate the kind of force you demonstrated yesterday. Corporate security, personal protection, covert operations. The applications are limitless." Maya set down her wine glass. "You want me to work for you?" "I want you to make us both very wealthy," Voss replied. "You have something I need, and I have something you want." "Which is?" Voss reached into his jacket and withdrew a small digital recorder. "Your sister's final research notes. The ones that were supposedly destroyed in the accident." Maya's heart rate spiked, but she forced herself to remain calm. Elena's final notes contained the complete methodology for neuromuscular optimization, including advanced techniques that Maya had only begun to master. If Voss had them, he possessed the key to creating exactly the kind of operatives he had described. "How do I know those are genuine?" she asked. "Because," Voss said, pressing play on the recorder, "you'll recognize your sister's voice." Elena's voice filled the room, discussing brainwave patterns and muscle fiber recruitment, with the passionate intensity Maya remembered so well. The recording was definitely genuine, and it contained information that Maya had never heard before. "This is just a sample," Voss said, stopping the playback. "There are hours more, including video demonstrations of techniques that go far beyond what you showed at the gym yesterday." Maya felt the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. Voss was offering her access to research that could advance her own abilities exponentially, but the price would be becoming complicit in his criminal enterprises. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked. "A partnership," Voss replied. "You help me develop a training program based on your sister's research. In exchange, you receive access to all of her work, plus compensation that will make you wealthy beyond your current imagination. And if I refuse, Voss's smile was cold and predatory, then you'll suffer the same fate as your sister. The techniques you've learned won't protect you from a truck losing its brakes on a steep hill. The threat hung in the air between them like a tangible presence. Maya understood now why Elena had been so frightened in the weeks before her death. Voss wasn't just a businessman protecting his interests. He was a predator who eliminated anyone who stood in his way. "I need time to consider your offer," Maya said, standing slowly. "Of course," Voss replied, though his tone suggested that her consideration was merely a formality. "But don't take too long. My patience has limits, and other people are becoming interested in your abilities." Maya left the penthouse with her mind racing. The meeting had confirmed her worst suspicions about Voss while presenting her with an impossible choice. She could accept his offer and become complicit in his crimes, or she could refuse and likely face the same fate as her sister. But there was a third option, one that Voss hadn't considered. Maya had spent 18 months preparing for this confrontation, and she hadn't come this far to surrender now. The next morning brought unwelcome visitors to the Iron Phoenix. 3 men in expensive suits entered the gym just as the early morning crowd was finishing their workouts. They moved with the fluid coordination of a professional team, their eyes constantly scanning for threats and exits. Victor recognized them immediately as the kind of corporate security that accompanied very wealthy and very dangerous people. He approached the leader, a scarred man whose muscles strained against his tailored jacket. "We are closed for private training," Victor announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had dealt with dangerous men before. "We're not here to train," the leader replied, his accent suggesting Eastern European origins. "We're here for Maya Chun." A hush fell over the gym as the remaining members realized they were witnessing something significant. Maya, who had been stretching in her usual corner, stood slowly and walked toward the confrontation. "I'm Maya," she said, her voice steady despite the obvious threat the men represented. "Dr. Voss would like to continue your conversation from last night," the leader said. "He's waiting in his car outside." Maya glanced toward the windows where she could see a black sedan with tinted windows idling at the curb. 2 more men stood beside it, their positions allowing them to watch both the gym's entrance and the street in both directions. "And if I prefer to finish my workout first?" Maya asked. The leader's smile was devoid of warmth. "Dr. Voss is not a patient man. He's given you time to consider his offer, and now he wants your answer." Victor stepped forward, his massive frame interposing itself between Maya and the corporate soldiers. "She said she is busy. Come back later." "With respect," the leader said, his hand moving slightly toward his jacket. "This doesn't concern you." "Everything in my gym concerns me," Victor replied, his own hands curling into fists that looked capable of breaking bones. The tension in the room ratcheted up several notches as the other gym members began to position themselves around the confrontation. Tommy, Sarah, and Jake formed a loose semicircle behind Victor, their expressions making it clear that they were prepared to defend their territory. Maya realized that the situation was about to spiral out of control. Victor and the others might be tough, but they were facing professional operatives who wouldn't hesitate to use lethal force. She needed to diffuse the tension before innocent people got hurt. "It's okay," she said, placing a gentle hand on Victor's arm. "I'll go with them." "Maya, no," Victor said, his voice heavy with concern. "These men are not here to talk business." "I know," Maya replied, her tone carrying a quiet confidence that surprised everyone in the room. "But I'm not the same person I was yesterday." She walked toward the door, pausing only to grab her gym bag and journal. The corporate soldiers flanked her as they left the building, their formation designed to prevent any possibility of escape. The sedan's interior was luxurious but felt like a mobile prison. Dr. Voss sat across from Maya, his expression unreadable as the car pulled away from the curb. The privacy partition was raised, isolating them from the driver and front passenger. "I trust you've had time to consider my proposal," Voss said without preamble. "I have," Maya replied, "and I've reached a decision." "Excellent. I knew you would see reason." Maya opened her gym bag and withdrew her journal, flipping to a page near the back. "Before I give you my answer, I'd like to show you something." She handed the journal to Voss, who accepted it with curious interest. His expression changed as he read the page, his eyes widening with a mixture of surprise and growing alarm. The page contained a detailed account of their meeting the previous night, including verbatim quotes of his admission to murdering Elena. But more than that, it contained information that Maya should not have been able to obtain: bank account numbers, transaction records, and communication logs that proved his involvement in Elena's death. "How did you get this information?" Voss demanded, his voice tight with controlled fury. Maya smiled, and for the first time since he had met her, Voss saw something dangerous in her expression. "The same way I learned to destroy that heavy bag. Elena taught me more than just physical techniques." The truth was that Maya had spent months infiltrating Voss's organization through digital means, using skills Elena had taught her during her graduate research into cybersecurity applications. Every email, every financial transaction, every communication between Voss and his operatives had been meticulously documented and stored in secure locations around the world. "You've been under surveillance for 8 months, Maya continued, her soft voice carrying an edge of steel. "Every crime, every threat, every illegal operation. I have enough evidence to put you away for the rest of your life." Voss's hand moved toward his jacket, but Maya's voice stopped him. "I wouldn't. The 3 men you sent to collect me are already unconscious in the gym. Victor and the others are surprisingly effective when they work together." Voss looked out the window and realized they were no longer moving through downtown Seattle. The car was heading toward the industrial district, away from populated areas and potential witnesses. "Where are we going?" he demanded. "Somewhere private," Maya replied. "Somewhere we can finish this conversation without interruption." The sedan pulled into an abandoned warehouse, its driver and passenger remaining in their seats as Voss and Maya exited the vehicle. The interior of the warehouse was dim and empty, except for a single chair positioned in the center of the space. "Sit," Maya instructed, her voice carrying an authority that seemed impossible given her delicate appearance. "You're making a serious mistake," Voss said, but he moved toward the chair nonetheless. "I have resources you can't imagine. People who will come looking for me." "I'm counting on it," Maya replied. "Because when they do, they'll find exactly what I want them to find." She reached into her gym bag and withdrew what appeared to be a simple tablet computer. But when she activated it, the device projected a holographic display that filled the air between them with documents, photographs, and video recordings. Voss found himself staring at a comprehensive record of his criminal activities spanning over a decade. Bank records showing payments to assassins, recorded conversations discussing the elimination of threats to his business, and video surveillance of meetings where he had ordered the deaths of people who stood in his way. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Most of these files were destroyed years ago." "Elena was very thorough," Maya said. "She suspected you were a threat long before you made your move against her. She spent 2 years building this case, and I spent 18 months completing it." The holographic display shifted to show Elena's face, her expression serious as she looked directly into the camera. When she spoke, her voice filled the warehouse with the authority of someone delivering a final message. "If you're watching this, Marcus, it means I'm dead and Maya has found you. Everything you see here has been transmitted to law enforcement agencies around the world. You have approximately 10 minutes before federal agents surround this location." Voss lurched to his feet, But Maya's voice stopped him cold. "I told you my sister taught me more than just physical techniques. She also taught me about justice." As if summoned by Elena's words, the sound of approaching helicopters began to echo through the warehouse. Bright lights began to penetrate the windows as tactical teams took positions around the building. "You planned this," Voss said, his voice mixing admiration with hatred. "All of it. The gym, the video, even last night's meeting." Maya nodded. Elena's research wasn't just about unlocking physical potential. It was about using the mind to solve problems that seemed impossible. "You killed the wrong sister, Dr. Voss." The warehouse doors burst open as federal agents flooded the space. Their weapons trained on Voss as they shouted commands for him to surrender. Maya stood calmly in the center of the chaos, her journal clutched in her hands and her sister's recorded voice still echoing from the holographic display. Dr. Marcus Voss, the man who had thought himself untouchable, was placed in handcuffs. As agents read him his rights. As they led him away, he looked back at Maya with a mixture of respect and fear. "You're not fragile at all," he said. "You're the most dangerous person I've ever met." Maya watched him disappear into the back of an armored van, then turned her attention to the federal agent who approached her with questions about the evidence she had provided. The case against Voss would be airtight, built on 18 months of patient investigation and Elena's brilliant foresight. But for Maya, the real victory wasn't in seeing her sister's killer brought to justice. It was in proving that Elena's research had applications far beyond what anyone had imagined. The techniques that had allowed her to destroy a heavy bag with a single punch had also given her the patience and focus to bring down a criminal empire. As she walked out of the warehouse and into the Seattle morning, Maya Chun was no longer the fragile girl who had stumbled through her first day at the Iron Phoenix. She was something new. Something her sister had envisioned but never lived to see. A perfect fusion of physical ability and mental discipline, capable of achieving the impossible through the simple act of refusing to give up. The viral video that had started everything continued to spread across the internet, but now it carried a different meaning. It wasn't just about a small woman destroying a heavy bag. It was about the power that came from being underestimated, the strength that could be found in silence, and the justice that could be achieved by those who appeared too gentle to fight. Victor was waiting for her when she returned to the gym, his expression mixing relief with a new kind of respect. The 3 corporate soldiers were indeed unconscious, zip-tied to chairs in his office while they waited for the police to collect them. "So," he said as Maya picked up her gym bag, "what happens now?" Maya smiled, the expression transforming her face completely. "Now I think I'd like to learn how to really box. Would you be willing to teach me?" Victor's answering grin was wide enough to crack his weathered face. "Little dove, I think you have already taught us more than we could ever teach you. But yes, I would be honored to help you learn." As Maya began her stretching routine in the corner where she had spent so many mornings being mocked and dismissed, the other gym members gathered around to watch with new eyes. They were seeing her clearly for the first time, understanding that the fragile girl they had laughed at had been something else entirely. The heavy bag that would replace the one she had destroyed was scheduled to arrive that afternoon. Maya made a mental note to be gentler with this one. After all, she had already made her point. 6 months after Dr. Marcus Voss's arrest, the Iron Phoenix gym had transformed into something neither Victor nor any of its longtime members could have imagined. What had once been a rough-edged training facility for local fighters had become a pilgrimage site for people seeking something more than traditional fitness routines. They came from across the country, drawn by stories of the small woman who had redefined what strength meant. Maya stood in front of the new heavy bag, watching as a young man named David attempted the breathing exercises she had been teaching. David was 19 years old, barely 130 pounds soaking wet, and had been bullied throughout high school for his slight build and quiet demeanor. His parents had driven him 800 miles from Denver after seeing one of the countless news interviews Maya had given following Voss's conviction. "Focus on the point of contact," Maya instructed, her voice carrying the same gentle quality it always had, though now it commanded immediate attention and respect. "Don't think about the power you want to generate. Think about the energy that's already there, waiting to be directed." David closed his eyes and took the deep, controlled breaths Maya had shown him. His stance shifted almost imperceptibly as he applied the mental techniques Elena's research had revealed. When he opened his eyes, there was a new quality to his gaze, a focused intensity that hadn't been there moments before. His punch connected with the bag with a solid thump that sent ripples through the heavy leather. It wasn't the explosive force Maya had demonstrated months earlier, but it was far more power than David's frame suggested he could generate. More importantly, the confidence that spread across his face was worth more than any physical technique. "Better," Maya said, making a note in the leather journal she now carried everywhere. "Remember, the technique isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming who you really are underneath the assumptions others have made about you." Victor watched from across the gym, his expression mixing pride with bewilderment. In the months since Maya had revealed her true capabilities, his simple boxing gym had evolved into something resembling a research institute. Scientists, athletes, military trainers, and ordinary people seeking empowerment had all made pilgrimages to learn from the woman who had turned conventional wisdom about strength on its head. The federal government had initially tried to classify Elena's research, declaring it a matter of national security. But Maya had anticipated this move, releasing carefully edited portions of her sister's work to universities and medical journals around the world before the authorities could intervene. The techniques were now being studied and refined in dozens of countries, making any attempt at suppression futile. Maya had been offered positions at prestigious institutions, lucrative contracts with professional sports teams, and consulting deals worth millions of dollars. She had turned them all down, choosing instead to remain at the Iron Phoenix and work with individuals who needed the techniques most. Her criteria for accepting students had nothing to do with their ability to pay and everything to do with their genuine need for empowerment. Jennifer Walsh had returned multiple times, trying to convince Maya to participate in a documentary about her story. The producer had visions of awards and acclaim, but Maya consistently declined, explaining that publicity was not her goal. She had agreed to a handful of carefully controlled interviews, enough to ensure that Elena's research received proper academic attention, but always steered the conversation away from her personal story and toward the science behind the techniques. The morning routine at the Iron Phoenix now included elements that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. Meditation sessions led by Maya drew participants who had never considered such practices. Breathing exercises that looked deceptively simple produced results that defied conventional understanding of human physiology. And always, there was the quiet presence of Maya herself, moving through the gym like a teacher whose classroom happened to be filled with punching bags and weight machines. Dr. Sarah Kim was one of the neuroscientists who had made the journey to Seattle, hoping to understand the mechanisms behind what she had seen in Maya's viral video. She held a doctorate from Stanford and had spent 15 years studying the brain's control over muscular function. But watching Maya work with students challenged everything she thought she knew. The conventional understanding is that maximum force generation requires maximum muscle mass. Dr. Kim explained to a small group of researchers who had gathered to observe Maya's methods. But what we're seeing here suggests that the brain's role in strength is far more significant than we previously believed. Maya overheard the conversation and approached the group with characteristic quietness. "Dr. Kim, you're absolutely correct about the brain's role, but you're thinking about it backwards." The neuroscientist looked up with interest. "How so?" "You're assuming that the brain needs to work harder to generate more force," Maya replied. But Elena's research showed that it's actually about the brain working more efficiently. Most people use only a fraction of their muscular potential because their brain is actively limiting them, protecting them from injury. The technique isn't about overriding those limits. It's about convincing the brain that it's safe to remove them temporarily. Dr. Kim nodded slowly, her scientific mind processing the implications. So the meditation and breathing exercises are essentially retraining the brain's safety protocols? Exactly, Maya confirmed. Elena discovered that certain mental states could trigger what she called neuromuscular optimization. The brain stops filtering signals to the muscles and allows them to function at their actual capacity instead of their perceived capacity. The conversation continued for another hour, with Maya answering questions that revealed a depth of understanding that rivaled trained researchers. She had not only mastered Elena's techniques but had continued developing them, adding refinements based on her work with students who came from vastly different backgrounds and physical conditions. Tommy Rodriguez, the heavyweight boxer who had once mocked Maya as princess, now served as one of her most dedicated assistants. The transformation in his attitude had been gradual but complete. Beginning the day he witnessed Maya's confrontation with Voss's operatives and culminating in his request to learn her sister's techniques for himself. "I spent 15 years thinking strength was about size and aggression," Tommy explained to a group of new students. "Maya taught me that real strength comes from understanding yourself completely. I can hit harder now than I ever could when I was just trying to muscle through everything." Tommy's own development had been remarkable to witness. He had always been a powerful fighter, but under Maya's guidance he had learned to channel his strength with precision that made him nearly unbeatable in the ring. More importantly, he had developed the kind of mental discipline that allowed him to remain calm under pressure, turning him from a brawler into a strategic fighter. Sarah Martinez had undergone a similar transformation. The former a fighter, had initially approached Maya's techniques with skepticism, but had gradually come to understand that her previous reliance on raw aggression had actually been limiting her potential. Under Maya's tutelage, she had learned to fight with an efficiency that conserved energy while maximizing impact. "The hardest part," Sarah often told new students, "is unlearning everything you think you know about fighting. Maya doesn't teach you to be stronger. She teaches you to stop holding yourself back." The Iron Phoenix had also become a gathering place for people whose stories echoed Maya's own journey. Jessica Wu, a software engineer who had been passed over for promotions because her colleagues perceived her as too quiet and non-assertive, had traveled from San Francisco to learn techniques that would help her project confidence in corporate settings. After 3 weeks of training with Maya, she returned to her job with a presence that commanded immediate respect from her peers. Marcus Thompson, a high school teacher who had struggled to maintain classroom discipline because of his mild demeanor, had found that Maya's breathing and posture techniques gave him an authority that transformed his teaching effectiveness. His students, who had previously seen him as an easy target, now responded to him with the kind of respect typically reserved for much more intimidating teachers. The success stories accumulated week after week, creating a reputation that drew attention from increasingly diverse quarters. Military trainers came to study techniques that could help soldiers overcome the limitations imposed by their physical size. Physical therapists sought to understand how Maya's methods could help patients recover from injuries that had previously seemed permanent. Even corporate executives arrived hoping to learn presence and confidence techniques that would serve them in boardroom negotiations. Maya approached each new student with the same careful attention, designing training programs that addressed their specific needs and limitations. She had developed an intuitive understanding of how different personality types responded to Elena's techniques, allowing her to modify her teaching methods for maximum effectiveness. The journal she carried had evolved into a comprehensive record of human potential, filled with observations about how mental state affected physical capability across a vast range of individuals. Universities had offered substantial sums for access to her notes, but Maya maintained that the information belonged to the people she worked with, not to academic institutions or corporate interests. Dr. Voss's trial had concluded 3 months earlier with a conviction on multiple counts of murder, conspiracy, and racketeering. The evidence Maya had compiled, combined with Elena's posthumous testimony, had been so overwhelming that Voss's defense team had eventually negotiated a plea agreement to avoid the death penalty. He would spend the rest of his life in federal prison, his criminal organization dismantled, and his assets seized to compensate his victims' families. Maya had attended only the sentencing hearing, sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom as the judge delivered his statement. When asked by reporters for her reaction to the verdict, she had simply said that justice had been served and that her focus was now on ensuring Elena's research benefited people who needed it most. The vindication had provided a sense of closure. But Maya had discovered that her real satisfaction came from the daily work of helping others discover their own hidden strengths. Each student who learned to overcome their limitations validated Elena's vision of a world where potential wasn't constrained by appearance or assumption. One afternoon, as Maya was working with a group of teenagers who had been referred by their school counselors, Victor approached with an expression of deep thoughtfulness. He had been unusually quiet for several days, and Maya had sensed he was working through something significant. "I have been thinking about expansion," he said without preamble. "Other cities, other gyms, places where people like your students could go when they cannot come here." Maya looked up from the breathing exercise she had been demonstrating. "What kind of expansion?" "Franchise maybe, but not for money," Victor replied. "I am thinking about finding people like you, people who understand what you are teaching, and helping them set up training centers. Not to get rich, but to spread this thing you are doing." The idea had considerable merit. Maya had been receiving requests from people around the world who wanted to learn Elena's techniques but couldn't travel to Seattle. She had been working on a training manual that could guide qualified instructors, but had been concerned about maintaining the quality and safety of the teaching. "It would need to be done carefully," Maya said. "The techniques can be dangerous if they're not taught properly." Elena spent years developing safety protocols that most people don't understand. "That is why I'm thinking we start small," Victor suggested. "Maybe 5 cities with people we train ourselves. People who understand that this is not about making money or becoming famous." Maya considered the proposal as she watched her current students practice the mental focusing exercises. The demand was certainly there, and she had identified several individuals among her advanced students who showed promise as potential instructors. Tommy and Sarah had both expressed interest in teaching, and both had developed a deep understanding of the underlying principles. "We would need to be very selective about locations and instructors," Maya said finally. "And we would need ongoing oversight to ensure standards are maintained." Victor nodded enthusiastically. "I have been thinking about this for months. I know people in other cities, good people who run clean gyms, understand what training really means. We could start with them." The conversation marked the beginning of what would eventually become the Elena Kien Institute, a network of training centers dedicated to teaching the principles Maya's sister had discovered. The first satellite location opened 6 months later. In Portland, Oregon, run by a former military trainer named Rebecca Santos, who had spent 3 months studying with Maya at the Iron Phoenix. Rebecca had arrived in Seattle as a skeptic, convinced that Maya's techniques were either fake or dangerous. She left as a convert, having experienced firsthand the profound changes that proper application of Elena's research could produce. Her Portland facility quickly developed its own following, attracting individuals who had heard about Maya's work but lived too far from Seattle to make the journey. The Institute's expansion was deliberately slow and methodical. Maya insisted, on personally training every instructor, a process that typically took 3 to 6 months, depending on the individual's background and aptitude. She also required ongoing communication between locations, with instructors sharing observations and techniques that could benefit students across the network. Dr. Kim had become a regular presence at the Iron Phoenix, documenting the physiological changes in students who practiced Maya's techniques over extended periods. Her research was beginning to reveal the specific neurological mechanisms behind Elena's discoveries, providing scientific validation for methods that had initially seemed impossible. What we're seeing is essentially a rewiring of the brain's control systems, Dr. Kim explained during one of the monthly research presentations Maya allowed at the gym. Long-term practitioners show increased activity in regions associated with motor control and decreased activity in areas linked to protective inhibition. The scientific validation had helped legitimize Elena's work in academic circles, leading to research grants that funded further study of the techniques. Universities in 12 countries had established programs based on Elena's principles, though Maya insisted that all research be conducted ethically and with full informed consent from participants. The media attention, despite Maya's efforts to minimize it, had continued to grow. Documentary filmmakers, book publishers, and television producers regularly approached her with offers that she consistently declined. She had learned that fame was a distraction from the real work of helping individuals transform their lives. However, she had agreed to work with Dr. Kim on a peer-reviewed paper that would formally introduce Elena's research to the scientific community. The paper, titled Neuromuscular Optimization Through Cognitive Conditioning, A New Understanding of Human Physical Potential, was published in the Journal of Applied Physiology and immediately became one of the most downloaded articles in the publication's history. The paper's publication led to speaking invitations from conferences around the world, most of which Maya declined. She did accept an invitation to present at the International Conference on Sports Science, where her presentation drew a standing ovation from an audience of researchers and practitioners who had previously been skeptical of her claims. The implications extend far beyond athletics, Maya told the conference audience. We're talking about helping people overcome limitations that have been imposed by society, by circumstance, or by their own assumptions about what they're capable of achieving. The presentation included video demonstrations of students who had achieved remarkable transformations through Elena's techniques. David, the slight teenager from Denver, was shown generating force levels that exceeded those of trained athletes twice his size. Jessica Wu demonstrated presence and authority that commanded respect in any setting. Marcus Thompson showed classroom management skills that had transformed his teaching effectiveness. Each case study illustrated the same fundamental principle. Human potential was far greater than most people realized, and the primary barriers to accessing that potential were mental rather than physical. Following the conference, Maya returned to Seattle with renewed appreciation for the work she was doing at the Iron Phoenix. The academic recognition was gratifying, but her real satisfaction came from the daily interactions with students who were discovering their own hidden capabilities. One morning, as she was preparing for a training session with a new group of students, Maya received a package with no return address. Inside was a small digital recorder and a handwritten note that she immediately recognized as Elena's writing. Maya, the note read, if you're reading this, it means you've found your path and are ready for the final piece of the puzzle. The recorder contains my thoughts on the future of our work and some techniques I never had the chance to fully develop. Use them wisely, and remember that the strongest people are often the ones who appear most fragile. Maya listened to the recording in the privacy of her apartment, tears streaming down her face as Elena's voice filled the room with insights and encouragement that seemed to speak directly to the challenges she had faced over the past months. The recording contained advanced techniques that pushed the boundaries of what Maya had thought possible, along with Elena's vision for how their work could ultimately help create a more just and equitable world. The goal was never to create super soldiers or corporate warriors, Elena's recorded voice explained. It was to help people understand that they don't have to accept other people's definitions of their limitations. Every person who learns these techniques and transforms their life creates a ripple effect that touches countless others. The recording ended with Elena expressing her love and pride in her younger sister, along with her confidence that Maya would carry their work forward in ways she had never imagined. It was both a farewell and a benediction, a final gift from a sister whose death had set in motion events that changed Maya's life completely. Maya returned to the Iron Phoenix the next morning with renewed purpose and the beginning of plans for techniques that would push Elena's research into entirely new territories. The shy, fragile-seeming woman who had first walked through the gym's doors was gone, replaced by someone who understood that true strength came not from muscle mass or aggressive posture, but from the quiet confidence of knowing exactly what you were capable of achieving. Victor noticed the change immediately, though he couldn't identify its source. "You seem different today," he observed as Maya began working with her first group of students. "I received a message from my sister," Maya replied, her voice carrying a new quality of certainty. "She reminded me that we're just getting started." The students who trained with Maya that day experienced something unprecedented. The techniques she taught seemed to carry an extra dimension of effectiveness, as if Elena's final insights had unlocked possibilities that even Maya hadn't fully understood before. By the end of the session, several students had achieved breakthroughs that typically took weeks to accomplish. Word of the extraordinary training session spread quickly through the network of Elena Chen Institute locations. Instructors from Portland, Denver, and the newly opened facility in Austin reported similar experiences, as if Maya's enhanced understanding was somehow transmitting itself across distances to benefit students she had never met. Dr. Kim, who had been monitoring Maya's work closely, was fascinated by the sudden acceleration in student progress. "It's as if you've accessed a new level of the techniques," she observed. "The neurological measurements we're seeing are unlike anything in our previous data." Maya smiled, thinking of Elena's voice on the recording and the love that had motivated everything her sister had accomplished. "I think I finally understand what Elena was really trying to teach me. It's not about the techniques themselves. It's about believing completely in your students' potential to transform themselves." The realization marked the beginning of a new phase in Maya's work, one that would eventually touch millions of lives around the world. The Elena Chen Institute continued to expand, but always with the careful attention to quality and safety that Maya insisted upon. Each new location was staffed by instructors who had undergone intensive training and demonstrated not just technical competence, but genuine compassion for their students. Maya herself remained based at the Iron Phoenix, continuing to work with individuals who needed the techniques most while training the next generation of instructors. She had found her calling in helping others discover that the limitations they had accepted were often illusions, and that true strength was available to anyone willing to look beyond appearances and assumptions. Victor often reflected on the transformation his gym had undergone since that morning when a small, seemingly fragile woman had walked through his doors. The Iron Phoenix had become a place of pilgrimage, but it had never lost its essential character as a place where serious people came to do serious work. "She changed everything," he would tell visitors who asked about Maya's impact. "Not just the gym, but the way we think about what people are capable of." When you see someone like Maya help a frightened teenager become confident, or watch a quiet teacher learn to command respect, you realize that strength comes in forms you never imagined. The heavy bag that had been destroyed in Maya's viral moment had been replaced, but Victor kept a photo of the original incident on his office wall. Not as a trophy or an advertisement, but as a reminder that the most important transformations often began with a single moment of someone refusing to accept the limitations others had placed on them. Maya's story had become legend in certain circles, but she remained focused on the individual students who continued to seek her out. Each person who learned Elena's techniques and applied them to overcome their own challenges validated her sister's vision and justified the difficult journey that had brought Maya to this point. As she worked with each new group of students, Maya carried with her the knowledge that she was not just teaching physical techniques, but helping people rewrite the stories they told themselves about their own capabilities. The fragile appearance that had once made her a target for mockery had become a powerful teaching tool, demonstrating that strength and capability could not be judged by external appearances. The woman who had once been dismissed as too delicate for a serious gym had become one of the most respected teachers in the world of human performance, sought out by people who understood that true strength was not about dominating others, but about refusing to be limited by their assumptions about what was possible. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.